Hello and welcome to bmclounge.com. This is Lounge Fever, a series of videos where we try to answer your questions. And today we are looking into Agile documents. What are documents generated while delivering a project using Agile? Are there any documents, by the way, in Agile, right? So let's get down to it. Let's understand the different type of documents and what do they do? What are they used for? But before that, if you're interested in other Lounge Fever videos where your FAQs on Agile are answered, the first link in the description is the entire playlist. Check that out. And if you're looking for concepts of Agile that you should know in order to prepare for your PMP exam or your PMI-ACP exam, then second and third link are the two links that you should check out. All right, let's get started. Quick reminder, please hit the like button. It helps us stay motivated and create more free content for you. Okay, so do you remember the principle working software over comprehensive documentation, right? Does this mean that there's no comprehensive documentation required when you're delivering a project using Agile because your focus is on working software? But I hope you also remember that specifications, requirement specifications are also important. We've already done a video, a Lounge Fever video on it. So the first link in the description, that playlist is going to have a video where we talked about how Agile does have requirement specifications document. And this video comes as part of this comment where, this person, Asgar, wants to know what are some examples of the Agile documents, such as change log, if that is maintained in the Agile lifecycle. So what are these different documents? So let's take a look at that. In this slide, we have basically talked about how there is a requirement specification document, which is very important. And then there is an Agile principle, which says working software over comprehensive documentation. So documentation is important, but comprehensive documentation is perhaps something that you're not going to find in Agile. So we all know that working software is the measure of progress against comprehensive documentation. So comprehensive documents is something that you're not going to find, but you will find documentation that is just enough for you to be able to move forward and make some progress. Now, most agile teams, they are going to use specific forms of documentation which are basically applicable to them. So unlike traditional waterfall model where you have certain documents that you mandatorily need to generate, there are no mandatory documents as such in agile, but some documents are used by many teams, and those are what that we are going to look into. So some documentation could be your project backlog, your sprint backlog, right, including any user story cards. Now I know some of you might say, hey, we have a software to basically track the project backlog. It's not tracked in an Excel file or a Word document. That's true. That is also a form of documentation. Remember, just enough documentation is what you need when you're delivering a project using Agile. Then there are burn up and burn down charts. All these are very common documentation that most of the Agile teams out there generate when they are basically delivering a project, right? So these are all highly visual documents, right? And these are a lot more effective in terms of communication versus pages and pages of text, right? So you don't have to get into pages of text. You can use visual way of communication. So here's the thing, you might think, if you're specifically coming from the traditional waterfall way of delivering projects, you might think that, for every process that a project goes through, you need some kind of document, right? Like for managing costs, managing risks, detailing requirements, you need documentation for all of these, right? But for Agile, these are not valid reasons to generate comprehensive documentation, because that can actually hinder the agile project success. That can actually slow down the way people work in agile. So you don't focus too much on comprehensive documentation. So then how do you manage risk? Well, you manage risk by focusing on delivering the highest value items first, rather than focusing on the entire project, looking at the entire project and then figuring out what could be the risks and then figuring out how you're going to handle those risks. Instead of all that, your focus is on delivering the highest value items first. That's it. Secondly, when it comes to requirements, and these are just two examples, right? You might think that for every process you need a document, and we can discuss that further as well. But we are taking two examples, how risks are managed and how requirements are managed. So, uh, for waterfall model projects, what happens is you create requirements early on, right? In the beginning itself. According to Agile, that's like the worst point in time in the project lifecycle to create a requirements document, because that's when you know the least about the project, and you can definitely bet money on the fact that requirements are going to change as you move along and you know more about the project and your customer knows more about the project, right? So Agile does not focus on creating documentation, requirements related documentation right in the beginning. So we basically have just enough documentation which can come in the form of your backlog items to get things rolling, to get things started, rather than creating pages and pages of requirements documentation. Now, all that being said, it should be noted that there are some documents that are actually very, very useful and they contribute to the success of an agile project. So teams should consider generating these documents. Now, like I said earlier, there's no mandatory set of list of all the documents that must be generated for an agile project, because that would defeat the entire purpose of agile itself. But these are documents that are generally generated when you are delivering an agile project. Number one is vision statement, and this defines the ultimate goals of a project and the why, right? Why are we really building this project, or why are we really building this product? So that is a vision statement. It need not be a 5 page long document. It can be 2 3 lines as well, but it's just a statement which is part of an agile documentation. Next is project overview, and this is going to summarize the critical information about a project. So just the critical information, not details again, right? Remember, comprehensive documentation is not what you are after. So critical information is summarized about the project, and this can include your vision, what are the kind of technologies that you're going to use, and what is the operating processes that you're going to use. So it should just be a few pages long. It should not go on and on and on, and it should not be a 20-page long document. It should be just a few pages, and it could include the vision, the technologies that you're using, and any kind of processes, operating process that you want to document. So that is a project overview document. So the next in the list is requirements documentation. And again, you don't really have to create a requirements document as SR document or something of that sort, which runs into 60 pages, right? You can simply use your product backlog and you can say that this is my requirements documentation. But it is essential to have a requirements documentation. And why is it essential to have it? We've already talked about it in one of our previous videos, so you can check that out. I'll share a direct link to that video as well in the description if you want to check it out. But yes, requirements documentation is definitely something that every agile project should aim to have. Acceptance testing documents, and these are helpful because this contains the acceptance criteria. If you remember the definition of done, we've already talked about it. I'll leave a direct link to this video as well in the description. So a lot of links in the description, do check it out. So acceptance criteria, this is used by testers to determine whether the requirement has been met, right? And they then use it to basically perform acceptance testing, and that acceptance criteria should be met, and this basically tells the developers that the requirement has been met and whatever the expectation out of a certain feature or a certain requirement, that has been met. Next is support documentation. So you may have a support team, and once you release your product, your support team should be aware of what you have released to the market, right? Because the customer, the first thing they have a problem, what the first thing that they do is call up support, right? So there has to be some kind of support documentation, and it is for those who are responsible to support your product once it is released, once it is live in the market. And some of the things that this document can include is a, let's say, a problem escalation procedure, any escalation metrics that you have, any point of contacts, right? Any troubleshooting guide. So all that is included as part of support documentation. Finally, the last document that agile teams can look to generate is called user documentation. And this can include your training materials, your user materials, any quick reference cards, right? Anything that helps answer customers' question, users' questions, right? So anything that helps answer it, anything that helps avoiding customer making a call to your support should be included in the user documentation. Now, these are all documents that should be generated as part of an agile project. Now, in the comment, another document was mentioned, which was change log. Now, not all agile teams are going to maintain that change log because, like I said in the beginning, there's no mandatory set of documents that must be generated for every agile project. Every team can have their own set of documents that they want to generate as part of the agile project. The documents that we discussed, these are the most common documents that are generated across the industry for every agile project, right? So agile environments, now one thing is for sure, that documentation is important even in agile environments. Now these documents, they may not always have the same name, they may have different names, and it is possible that all agile teams are not generating all of these documents, right? These documents, again, one last time, whatever documents that we discussed, these are vision statement, project overview, requirements documentation, acceptance testing documents, support documentation, and user documentation. Finally, question for this video: what kind of documents do you generate on your agile projects? Do you have a set list of documents that must be generated as part of your agile project delivery? Let me know in the comments. Definitely looking forward to your answers. And that's all that we had in this video. If you got value out of it, consider hitting the like button, subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already, and hit the bell icon to stay notified every time we upload new content. Don't forget to check out our website, pmclounge.com, your number one free PMP and project management resource. Also, if you like our work, consider contributing to PMC Lounge at pmclounge.com/contribute.